Blue skies means fun days. Helping skydivers with tips and techniques about safety, training and fun jumping from those who know. Welcome to this different episode of Blue Skies Fun Days. A common question in conversation these days is, what's your favourite audio podcast? For me, this is an easy answer. James La Barrie's 20-Minute Call. Not because I work on the podcast, but because of the incredible guests he interviews and the insightful questioning that explores the motivation of these people in our sport. James, the idea for the 20-minute call, where did it come from?
Garnet, I've been thinking about this podcast for years, and it's just been sitting on the back burner for ages. I did my first podcast in 2007 or 8 when I ran Skydive Carolina, and I so enjoyed it, and it was something that I wanted to do again. And almost 20 years later, just a little less, 15 odd years later, here we are doing it again. If you've ever been to a drop zone, which of course you have many times, the people that we admire, that we would love to have a conversation with, take maybe a Craig Girard or Ileana, when they walk 5 steps, everyone wants to have a conversation with them because they're such fascinating and approachable people. And really, this podcast allows me to get past the short interchanges that we have at the drop zone and allows me to dig down deep and have truly great conversation. And that's really the motivating factor.
Well, with my Blue Skies Fun Days, part of my goal is to try and save lives. In marketing terms, we talk about a USP, your unique selling proposition. Well, in this case, what's your unique skydiving philosophy behind the 20-minute call?
Simply put, beyond the jumpsuit. Many podcasts really interview a lot of skydivers based on their accomplishments and or specific jumps or world records. I'm actually a little less interested in that. I'm more interested in what is the makeup of the person that allows them to achieve on such a high level. And what I'm finding is that the makeup, the background, how they grew up, what their interests were, tells such a very interesting story and paints a much better picture of the people that we see at the drop zone. So simply put, it's beyond the jumpsuit.
What sort of reception are you getting from the listening public?
Well, I don't think I'd tell you that if it was not well received, but I'm happy to say that it actually is being quite well received. Every time an episode posts, I tend to get a private message either through social media or even texts for those that I know with little tidbits that they heard from the program that they particularly liked. So that always feels very good. And in looking at the download data, every week we have more and more downloads coming. The word is spreading. Yeah, it seems to be all positive. And I think maybe part of that is I don't really have an end goal. My goal is to satisfy my curiosity. So, of course I wish for people to like it, but I'm not overly concerned if many don't. This is kind of a gift to myself. This is the hobby I've been wanting to do, meeting the people that I want to meet.
Could you just give me a quick example of the sort of people or the different people that you've spoken to so far?
Of the people I've spoken with, it's almost 3 categories. It's your drop zone owners or drop zone managers. I think it's important to tell the story of that individual. The second is, typically world champions. Why have they been able to accomplish so much? And then lastly, it would be a skydiver with a great story. Examples, Rich Grimm, and learning all about what goes on behind the scenes in these exotic boogies. He may not be a world champion, say, skydiver, but he's a world champion boogie creator. Or most recently, Ephraim, Vega de Verona, and his story of ADHD and how he learns, and a balloon jump gone wrong. Just incredible stories. Yeah, it really runs the gamut in the colorful patchwork that makes up the skydiving community. I've had the gamut of some of the most well-known people in the industry, starting out with episode number 1 with the amazing Sonic from The Ranch, Carrie Bell from the Highlight Pro Skydiving team, Shannon Pilcher, Scott Miller, Craig Gerard, Melissa Nelson, Mike Vetter from Go Jump America, Miles Dasher from the Red Bull Air Force, Dan BC, Rich Grimm, Melanie Curtis, and several more. So it's been great getting to know all these amazing people.
And when you say you're getting to know them, as I edit the episodes, I feel like we're really getting inside their thoughts and their souls and their hearts as to what drives them and what motivates these people.
I would agree, Garnet. When you get insights of how somebody grew up, what their interests were as kids, what their parents were into, how they first stumbled into skydiving and the reason for it, and what propelled them, what motivated them to move up the ladder, if you will. Yeah, fascinating insights. For those that may have listened to the Craig Gerard episode, we tumbled into, when I asked him, who sort of the celebrities that you've met, being that Craig has really met a lot of folks over time, he mentioned George and Barbara Bush. It was a really interesting insight to Craig in terms of who he looks up to, but also the behaviors of people that we've seen in world news, like George Bush and Barbara Bush. What are they like as real people? Interestingly enough, Craig sent me a couple of photographs from that visit of meeting George and Barbara Bush. Fascinating. And yet again, another insight to Craig, who weeks after our interview is following up with little tidbits from our conversation. I would say I'm getting to know these folks well. I hope the audience is getting to know them a little better too.
Are you getting many comments back about people feeling inspired by what some of these leading lights in skydiving have said?
I have. I've gotten a few. And the levels of inspiration are from other podcasters who seem to like the more in-depth questions. I got that a couple of days ago. I've got drop zone operators who've reached out to me who've said, I've really been inspired to listen to some of our other drop zone owners, making it feels good for them to hear that, oh, I'm not the only one. And I really like the way that they've handled, XYZ emergencies. And that might be the case with my interview with Mark Trapari, the drop zone owner from Skydive Newport, certainly Mike Vetter from Go Jump America, who has incredible stories of highs and lows of running a drop zone.
What have the responses been like from the jumping public?
The responses from the jumping public have been very positive. I think because my guests have been willing to be vulnerable, and that vulnerability allows for more resonance or connection and inspiration. During my interview with Melissa Nelson, she really opened up and took us, to a place of where she was really at, and the response I got from that was extraordinary. Certainly, many people were inspired by her just raw honesty. It was beautiful to listen to. Additionally, Craig Gerard, my interview with him, talking about the elements of teamwork with Arizona Airspeed when you're with the same people for an entire year, making an incredibly aggressive training schedule, and how they're able to purposefully have positive team dynamics. I got a lot of feedback from various people in four-way or on any kind of team to go, wow, that was super insightful. So I've really had the gamut. Many other people inspired by, say, Rich Grimm, and wow, he is really doing major big things beyond what anyone could have thought unless he actually talked about it. So the feedback has been positive. both from an inspirational to, wow, I didn't know that about that person. I'm so glad I learned. Oh, I should share another story. I got a message from someone having listened to Shannon Pilcher's interview. And in the show notes, I highlighted the documentary film that he was in called Skyjumpers. And having listened to the podcast, he sort of went down this dark hole of watching videos and then eventually that documentary. He was so moved and found Shannon's story to be that much more emotional and inspiring. So, my brain now is tracking of a lot of the messages that I get almost weekly from various episodes.
And the future for the podcast? At the moment, we're looking at it being weekly. How many weeks?
My favorite podcasts show up every week, and my goal is for my podcast to show up every week. I find a good podcast makes me long for Monday when my favorite podcast called How I Built This comes out. And my goal for this podcast is that people look forward to it coming out. And once I can build an audience, which is building, I don't want to let that audience down. So my goal is every Monday, without fail, something will be coming across from the 20-minute call.
I know it started out as a bit of a charity, but you're now on Patreon and you sponsor it yourself, plus there's Burble. Are there any other ideas or plans to get future sponsorship?
Yes, as our audience grows, it is my goal to get a title sponsor for the 20-minute call. We will see also building a small community on Patreon where I am getting ready to have regular postings about a little bit behind the scenes of what goes into the making of the 20-minute call. I think some podcasters out there will just do a raw read and publish. But for those that find the audio quality maybe of the podcast to be quite good, well, there's a lot that goes on behind it, starting with where I'm sitting and speaking with you right now. As I speak to you, I'm in a soundproof phone booth in my office. And so it allows for wonderful acoustics as the walls all around me are padded. Additionally, the work of yourself, the volume of hours that you put into editing each podcast. I know that I'll share with our audience that, some episodes will get 300 to 400 edits. This is major work. So it is a hobby, but it's very much a passion project. And even though it's a hobby, we want to do it well. And I think the team that we have between you and I, is proving to be, the proof is in the pudding because people are responding well. The audience is growing every week. And, it's the culmination of many things between the research I do behind the scenes before meeting with anyone. I usually do 2 to 3 hours of research from anyone I interview, to your edits, to thinking clearly about what I want to have in show notes. I like podcasts that have show notes, and that takes a bit of time, and the various things we do for uploading and distribution, and then marketing on social media, et cetera, et cetera. So it's quite a lot of work, and is why I'm hoping to get some sponsors to help offset our expenses, because it's not inexpensive, but despite the costs, I'm going to continue doing it even if we get no further sponsors, because I'm enjoying it. And as hard as I work with my business, it's very all consuming, and this is the pleasure I get by being able to carve out time every week to have a good conversation or even have a great laugh with some of our guests. So that was a long-winded answer, Garnet, just to share with you. Yes, I would love to get some sponsors, but even if we don't, this podcast will come out every Monday.
Sounds great, and it's been great chatting with you, James. Thanks for all the insight, and thank you for the opportunity to actually work on the project. I find it quite inspiring and quite uplifting to the soul to work on the project, so thanks for that. Hopefully we'll see you again on Blue Skies Fun Days another time.
Well, thanks for having me, Garnet. I do want to emphasize as we sign off that the podcast is only as good as the sum parts. And if it was just left up to me, then it would not be nearly as good. And the combination between your skills behind the camera or behind the microphone and, I think my due diligence in getting to know my subjects is proving to be quite good. So while I get the kudos, obviously, because my name is on the graphics and, the promotions of it, there's a lot more than me involved, and the big piece of that is you. So I'm very appreciative for all that you're doing.
Remember to support this channel by subscribing, ringing the bell, and telling your friends. For more tips and techniques, click subscribe.